Hey, welcome to the Jungle Brothers podcast. It's Joey here, and today we're doing something new. We're doing a rewind episode, which is us bringing back an episode from the archives to deliver to you guys. Now, here's why we're doing it. Our show has been around for a long time. We're at 214 odd episodes now. The show's gone through many different chapters over the years. It's even gone off air for long periods of time when we've simply lost momentum or moved to the gym or COVID, etc. But this has resulted in us having some extremely valuable conversations which have gone relatively unnoticed for the majority of our listeners. And I find myself having conversations with people often about certain topics we've spoken about and realize that a lot of these discussions haven't been heard by people. And so I wanted to create a way where we could bring those discussions back and present them for you guys. Now, today's particular episode gives me goosebumps when I listen to it. This is a conversation with a man named Kashi, and in this conversation he introduces us to a system of strength and conditioning that was used by the Persian Empire to prepare men to go to battle, and this is for an empire that was at war continuously for around 1,000 years. It's very hard to get your head around the scale of fighting wars continuously for that long. This system is something that is relatively unknown here in the West. I've been fortunate enough to have been introduced to it by Kashi. It includes wrestling, which obviously speaks to me, being a jiu-jitsu guy. But it goes way deeper than that. He talks to us about the Zurkhane, which is the house of strength, temples which were built and where strength was the thing that people devoted themselves to there. Young and old men alike would come in and prepare themselves and build their bodies. This obviously for us with the gym is something that it kind of really speaks to us. But he talks to us about the origins of the Amazonian woman, where this term comes from, and the actual female warriors that certain tribes within Iran became famous for. I don't want to give too much away, but this is one of the most gangster fucking stories I have ever heard. And still, when I share this with people, this is like brand new information. So I'm super excited to be doing a rewind, bringing this episode back. I hope you enjoy it. As always, please share it with a friend. It helps to grow the show. And of course, when we hear the introduction, the original one, the stuff that we're mentioning there is mostly irrelevant now because this episode was originally recorded in 2020. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, we're rolling up. Hello, fam. Welcome to episode 82 of the Jungle Brothers podcast. It's Joey. We've got Paul in the house.
What's up?
And we've got our guest Kashi with us today.
Hello, everyone.
Good to have you with us, man.
Really happy to be here.
Couple things before we rip in. We have our Persian yoga workshop coming up on the 14th of November, which is 2 Saturdays from now. So not this weekend, but the next. Wait, let me just confirm that. It's not this weekend, not the next, but the one after that. So you basically got 2 weeks. But that's going to be the topic of today's conversation. So let me expand more on that as we go. The other event you guys need to know about is Fight Night, which is coming up on December 12th. This is sponsored by Rise Foundation Australia.
Well, they're the chosen charity that we're working with. Yep.
Okay. And so all of the proceeds of the event go towards them. Mm-hmm. And then Rise are going to be putting that back in towards educating our people, our members and coaches on mental health first aid. Is that right?
That's the plan at the moment. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
They just want to put the money back into running more courses to spread awareness and upskill folks. So they were like, we'll just do it with your people in the gym, whether it's the coaches or members.
So cool.
It's a good idea.
Legends. If you don't know much about Rise, you can listen to a podcast we did with Ben Higgs of Rise Foundation probably about 10 episodes ago. Really good episode talking about mental health and all aspects related to that. Go back and have a listen if you haven't already. But the fight night's going to be epic. We've got a bunch of different people from the gym fighting each other, kickboxing, boxing, wrestling, MMA, jiu-jitsu. It's going to be quite outrageous, but we are going to run it to a really high standard. There'll be a live stream. You can purchase the stream. In true JB fashion, it will be a gold class event. And then the only other person to thank is Panavore for providing the coffee that I'm drinking today. Paul's drinking. Kashi doesn't drink coffee, but he's having a cup of tea. You don't drink coffee, bro?
Not really, no. Come more from a tea culture.
I like that. All right. Well, actually, this is a nice little a little segue. Can you give us an introduction, just to yourself? How you ended up here? You came to us representing this art that you're passionate about. What's your background, and how's this all taken place?
Okay, that's a pretty big question, but why don't I start with telling you about how I found out about you. So obviously I've been trying to promote Persian yoga here in Australia for the last 5-6 years on a full-time basis. And, I've presented it in various different places, and it's mainly been initially through your regular gym, a couple of different CrossFit locations, and yoga studios. It's really, I felt, was a little bit of a mismatch because of the ethos, the principles, and the format of the training that I kind of introduced through Persian yoga, and that is a more of a martial arts oriented philosophy, and that's what you do here very well. I found through social media, I found you, and I saw that you have really integrated very well functional strength and movement, focusing on mobility and strength, and you also included here martial arts that you do, and I think you've tied it in very well, and very few other places that I've seen have done this so well. And for me, I'm trying to introduce you guys to Persian yoga and what that is all about, and the philosophy and the functional aspects of the art to you. And I hope that you see that how it really ties in that strength conditioning for specifically martial arts. And I wanted to be a part of this. That's why I reached out to you and said, look, I really think you're going to like this. And I hope I'm right. What do you think?
So far, I've loved it, man.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I've been telling, because we've got the workshop coming up in a couple of weeks, and obviously it's quite, folks don't know what it is, right? And I'm getting, the next thing I want to ask is just to really break down what Persian yoga is. But I had heard good things about you from other people kind of in the strength community, in the training sort of community. And once I met you, obviously the techniques and the tools that you use and all of that stuff was quite interesting. But what I found most intriguing about it was your passion for the art and how you really feel, I guess just how you live the whole culture and how powerful it's been in your life. And that's what I'm most attracted to. That's what I think is cool. And I think, for us as coaches and people who have learned from other teachers along the way, often the most interesting teachers you have are the people who are just the most fascinating characters. The content of what they're teaching has to be good, but if the person teaching it is kind of fascinating, then that makes the whole education process a lot more engaging. So I think, you really embody it in a way, and that's a rare thing in this kind of modern world.
Thank you for saying that, and I really love the art. I've been practicing it for the last 12 years, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how I got into that. But previous to that, I was a martial artist on an amateur level. I used to be competitive, and
what sort of martial arts?
Shoot fighting. Have you heard of this?
It's kind of like a derivative of MMA. Am I right?
Yeah, it's a very early type of MMA. If you guys are familiar with Frank Shamrock, Ken Shamrock brothers, they kind of really introduced this shoot fighting. I grew up in Sweden. It was very big in Europe, shuto and shoot fighting. So it's a mix of judo, wrestling, and Muay Thai. And so I was really involved with that and done different style of martial arts as well. And I'm 42 now, and as I started growing older, priorities changing in life and so on, I couldn't really be as rigorous with my training, especially moving to Australia and moving and studying and working and all of this stuff. Life gets in the way, you get children and all these things, but I always wanted to maintain my strength and conditioning with a specifically martial arts focus. And that's when as I said 12 years ago, I reconnected with Persian yoga when I traveled back to my home country of Iran and underwent some training there, and since then I've really immersed myself in that culture and in that way of life, because traditionally, this is a lifestyle. Like in Iran, it's a culture. It's like people live and breathe it. That's it's a greater community, and it's a way of gnosis. Or, it's a way of attaining self-knowledge through strength, through practicing strength, and it's a greater kind of like culture and way of life around that. That is perhaps difficult to embody in this Western or in Australian context, but as I said in the beginning, I feel that you guys have done it very well here, and it is that I aspire to share with people. That it is that I aspire to immerse myself further in, because it has given me so much, and I really want to share that.
Very cool. Very cool. So can you clarify for us, Persian yoga, obviously everyone knows what yoga is as a thing. And what I understand is that there seems to be no relation between Persian yoga and yoga, right? As it is here in the West. What is it? What does the name mean? What's that connection?
Okay. To answer that question, we really need to define what does yoga mean. Yoga, the word itself is a Sanskrit term. It derives from the word yuj, which means to unify. The word unify in English derives from this word, and essentially it is it is a practice, it is a way of unification, and that this unification, I mean, this can be, of course, debated, and other people may have different perspective on this, but to me, this unification is an integration of the body and the spirit. There is these aspects of mindfulness and the mental, I guess, body, mind, spirit as they divide it, although we don't do that in our specific culture, and I can elaborate on that why, but it is the unification of these different aspects of you that make you a whole person, and it is a practice to attain that. That is, to me, what yoga means. I think the best explanation that I've heard about what yoga is the practice of meditation. Now, this practice of meditation can take various forms. I mean, in Eastern approaches, they talk about mindfulness, they talk about stillness meditation. But my master says that for it to be true, the opposite needs also to be true. So if you have an approach to meditation through stillness and mindfulness, you can also have an approach to meditation through movement and what we refer to as heartfulness, which is really at the core of the Persian yoga way, if you want to say that. Now, this is the term yoga, and you mentioned like the comparison and the contrast between, I guess, Indian yoga or Hatha yoga, which is the original yoga. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, some 250 BC something. And it is similarly around those times that we start to see in literature references to Pahlavani, which is the authentic or the original term that we use in our language to describe this practice. And I need to perhaps elaborate on what that means, because Pahlavani is the conjunction of the word Pahlavan with the suffix I at the end. So in our language, in Persian, that I is emphasizing a way of being. So it means the way of the Pahlavan. And now what does this word Pahlavan mean? It is the, I guess, combination of the English terms of a knight, a champion, and a hero, kind of like a paladin, and so in essence, this means the way of the knight. And you gotta, to understand really how this came about, you gotta go back in history very, very long time ago, when the Indo-Iranians and the Indo-European people were migrating, and they were like one people, and they start splitting up into different groups, and they migrate to different areas. The northern Indo-Iranians settle in northern India, the Iranians settle in the Iranian mainland, and that's where their cultures and their arts start to diverge and develop at a different rate and in a different way. So then you have to also look at the social context of these people. These peoples had a social structure, which most societies they have, and excuse me, the Aryans had a caste system, or they still have a caste system in their society, where it is divided between the Brahmans, the Kshatriyas, and the Vaishyas. And essentially what that means, the Brahmans were the or are the religious or the spiritual leaders of that culture and society. You got the Kshatriyas, who are the warriors or the kingly and the warrior caste. And then you have the Vaishyas, which essentially means everyone else, or farmers and merchants and all of that. So these, if you look at how their cultures and societies evolved mainly around these two main castes. Some societies are more driven by the Brahmanis, or the religious or the spiritual leaders, and they gave rise to this Hatha Yoga, or this practice, this physical practice of unification of the body and spirit. Now, the warriors, the Kshatriyas, also had a practice, or also have a practice, and that practice is referred to as Pahlavani, or in India, which this practice also exists today in a different form, although very similar, they refer to it as Pahlavani. So it's very, very similar. They have different, a little bit differences and nuances between them, which are very interesting to talk about. But essentially, this art is the art of meditation of the warrior caste, or the Kshatriya caste. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So you're saying that in amongst the evolution of these different societies, the predominant, well, maybe not predominant, but there was a certain parts or certain different elements, different castes within that society had their practice, be it physical or spiritual.
Exactly.
And that would become a predominant thing in that culture. And so it just so evolved that in Iran, the caste system, do you say of the Kshatriyas?
Kshatriyas, yeah.
Kshatriyas.
The warriors.
So that became like quite a prominent practice, this strength practice. And
yes, it has to be. And then you have to start looking at the history of that region, why it turned out that way. Because you look at the history of Middle East, there's wars happening even to this day. And that goes back very, very long time in history. So, for example, like the Persians, they have fought the world's second longest war in the history of the earth. 780 years of warfare with the Roman Empire.
Wow.
To put that into context, what does that necessitate? It necessitates readily access to trained men, warriors, and fighters that can, generation after generation, be ready to be deployed. So that's just one example, and then there's been several waves of invasions from Muslim Arabs to the Greeks. I'm sure you are very, very familiar with Alexander's conquest of Persian Empire, and then there's the Turks and the Mongols, and the list goes on, and even to this day. So it necessitated this art and culture to really be more prominent. To really play a major role, because time and time again, after all these various invasions by these various people, Persians as a whole are very freedom-loving and peaceful culture, and they had to kind of rise up against these invaders and oust them, which they did time, and there is a long history about that, and very fascinating as well, of these Pahlavans, or these knights coming together, assembling together, training together in caves, in underground facilities. When they are, for example, when the Arabs invaded, they didn't allow Persian men to gather in groups or carry arms, etc. So they had to do this in hiding, and they had to disguise their practices. As you saw today, we, for example, use the instrument that resembles the shield, and we use instrument that resembles clubs and maces. So they had to kind of disguise their practice and incorporate music and chanting and drumming into it, kind of like capoeira. I'm sure
very similar to
capoeira. So this evolution happened over thousands of years, and the culmination and the end result of that is the Pahlavani culture, which, as I said, we have the earliest literal, the earliest references to it in literature is from the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, that are Indian texts that dates it back to about 250 BC. But we have reasons to believe that it's much older than that. So to answer your questions, yes, there was definitely a need in terms of what was going on in that region that made this art become much more, predominant in the Iranian culture. As I also mentioned, it exists as well in the Indian culture. But there, I think that Brahmani oriented or led movement of Hatha Yoga became more prominent, and also through Western discovery of that and the kind of cultural appropriation of that, it spread more and became more prevalent in the West.
Yeah, makes sense. And now you have beer yoga and naked yoga.
Chocolate yoga. And
chocolate, yeah,
yoga.
You've got all these great different
So why not
forms
Persian yoga?
Yeah. Wow, so an ancient art form dating back to around 250 BC.
Yes,
Incredible.
and also the Persian culture is the oral culture. We don't necessarily have a written culture until very, very late. So we have reasons to believe that this culture is actually much older than that. But as I mentioned, the first textual references to that is dating around that time.
And has it changed much over time?
Yes, of course it has. It was, for example, it used to be practiced outdoors. But as I mentioned, because of subsequent invasions, they had to literally go underground and practice in caves. And today it's practiced in a dome-shaped structure, which is often windowless, with just one window at the top of the dome to let in some light, And they practice in an octagon, in a pit, inside a pit in an octagon at the center of that temple. So it has changed, and for example, the spiritual practices around that has been flavored and nuanced throughout these thousands of years by the various kind of cultural, spiritual, and religious movements that have developed in that region over time.
Interesting. Wow, so old. It's no surprise that it has changed over all that time.
It has to, because if you don't change with time, you're extinct. Like, look at the dinosaurs.
Right. That's right. All the religions are now bowing to the modern way of life now, having to make adjustments to fit in with and be relevant in the modern world.
To be relevant, exactly.
I wanted to ask, so what does it look like today? Not just the things of like what they practice, but like how many people are practicing it worldwide, back home where it originated, and then here in Sydney. Like, do you practice with a group of people here, or is it difficult to find people?
Okay. It is very well alive, and it's actually growing faster today than any time and point in its history, thanks to technology and thanks to like initiatives such as this. In Iran, there are, as I mentioned earlier, we practice in temples, and in Iran today there's round about 500 temples over throughout the country, and they've established now temples in neighboring countries in that region in Iran, such as in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Tajikistan, and where the Persian culture is very, very strong.
Okay. And has that just grown like in the last 50 years to those sorts of numbers, but it was much more diminished? Or was it, Yeah,
I'll tell you. In the early 2000s, it was really diminishing.
Yes.
Because of the influence of bodybuilding and Western style training that also became like very popular in Iran. So the younger generation was like really looking at that rather than the traditional way of training, because it's considered like too old school. Like we have two terms for this art. One is Pahlavani, as I mentioned. The other one literally means the way of the ancients. So the way of the ancients weren't as popular, and but that has changed through the initiatives that these guys are taking, and also the interest and the focus that people in the West are starting to show to this art, because through the endeavors of certain individuals, the art of the Indian clubs have become very, very popular in the West, and people start looking at that and they started asking questions. Okay, so where does Indian clubs come from, and how was that developed? And they come to the art of the meal or the Persian clubs, which is the third art of Persian yoga, but nevertheless a very prominent art of Persian yoga, which is the precursor and the grandfather of all type of clubs. I'm sure you know about the club bell, the steel type of clubs. There's now mace clubs as well, and different things, you know. So the Persian meal is the grandfather of all these things. So people started looking at that, and they I mean, it doesn't matter where you are. People want something that is original. People want something that is authentic. People want something that they can connect with, and something that has it has a greater value than just the material, you know. And this art has it all. It has all of those things. So a lot of people are paying attention to that. And in 2007, when I first went to Iran to learn this art, I and a group of other individuals, we formed the first international organization, the only international organization with its headquarters in Iran, with the mission to spread this art across the globe, in the whole world. Our vision is to make Persian yoga or Pahlavani part of the Olympic Games, and to do that, this art needs to be practiced in every continent and in minimum 55 countries. And I think last count we're at 48 countries, and I'm the development officer for the International Zukhan Sports Federation in Oceania. So my objective is to grow this art in Australia, and I have done that. I have several students that they teach. They teach in Sydney, they teach in Queensland, also in Victoria, and I teach myself more on kind of like a workshop basis, on a private basis. The reason I haven't been teaching like as many classes is I recently graduated as a chiropractor, so that was like a very full-on experience and time-consuming. So I'm kind of now again finding my feet and trying to organize myself to promote this at a more structured and intensive way. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Do you find the people here that are being engaged in Australia, they mainly of Persian descent, or is there lots of people taking up to it?
Well, my target is not necessarily, I mean, I want to share it with everyone that is interested, but my target is not necessarily people of Iranian descent. I want to share this with as many people as possible, those who are interested and capable of doing this. I mean, you, Joey, have some experience with that, with this art, and I'm sure you can, you have felt that it's a strong practice. It's a very, very strong and rigorous practice. So
it's extremely challenging.
It's not for everyone, but that doesn't mean not everyone who put their mind to it cannot do it. I mean, everything is just mindset, right? So I have felt, and in my experience, I have been very successful with sharing it with a lot of group of people, specifically in the US and in Canada, because their culture is a little bit different than the Australian culture, which is a little bit more conservative, I would say. And but nevertheless, it's growing in popularity here as well, and a lot of people are looking at this at the moment. It's
interesting thinking about you trying to help this art get a foothold in the Oceania region, and just thinking about how, I look at it and I like all of the richness behind it, but that richness is also, I think, what makes it hard for a lot of people to get into, because it's not like you just go do a class of it once a week and you can it's not like a spin class, right? Or it's not like an Olympic weightlifting session. Yeah. It's like this whole thing that you have to...
It's an art form.
It's an art form, and you have to buy into it, and you have to give it time, and you have to suck at it for I'm guessing, for quite a while, and all those things. But then I think about like jiu-jitsu and how, it's kind of abstract, right? Like, the gi is not abstract because we've been introduced to the gi, like the uniform through judo and karate and taekwondo. But this idea that you have people in the West dressing up in these funny kind of old school kimonos and wrapping colored belts around themselves to practice an art, it's the same thing. Like that was once just as obscure in a country like this as is something like Persian yoga.
Exactly.
So it's like, there's hope there, right? It can become, not to say that you necessarily want it to become something that is as big as, say, judo or taekwondo, but for it to become something that is widely kind of recognized and practiced by quite a few people. It's a very admirable goal.
Well, thank you. Well, I guess that would be a very good side effect of what I'm trying to do, but my objective is really to share it with those who have the eyes to see and the heart to follow through. It is, I've experienced this again and again. It is either they love it or they can't do it and they don't want to do it because it's too much, as you mentioned. It's just like too many new things to learn, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it enables a lifelong practice.
Can I ask, in the practice, how much of that is the physical training and how much time is spent on the spiritual aspects of it? And for you personally, or as well as you say, maybe you'll start to build more of a structure for people to, come in and do some classes with more structure and you present it in such a way, like how much of that would be taken up with mindful practice and spiritual practice?
This is a very interesting question, and the best way is to give you a kind of like comparison, and so you're able to compare and contrast the different mindset and the different, philosophies around this approach. One is very predominant in the West. I refer to it as a linear approach. It's serial. So, for example, you come to your gym, you do a warm-up, maybe you do some stretches, then you do your strength practice, and afterwards maybe you do some cardio some other day, you know what I mean? And perhaps even you meditate on some day, right? So it's a very linear approach. It's serial processing. We have a fundamentally diametrically opposite approach, and our approach is circular. It's integrative. So in a single practice session, we will practice all of the above: meditation, concentration, coordination, agility, balance, strength, flexibility, mobility. All of it is integrated within the various practices or arts that we perform. There are 7 arts to Persian yoga, and it's meant to enhance and develop, basically strengthen you from all these different aspects, both physically and spiritually, in the shortest amount of time. Because as I mentioned, the Romans are coming.
Yes. Yes. So can you give us an example of how, if you spent a few hours of an afternoon practicing, like what's an example of, I'm imagining it in my head, but can you explain?
Sure. Okay. It would never be a couple hours. It's meant to be like much more short and concise than that. Usually 40 minutes to hour and a half max. If it goes beyond that, I think you're having a very lazy practice. I guess the best explanation of what I'm trying to say here now is the experience of it. Nothing substitutes for that, But I will try, and it would be. I'll go back to how they practice in the temple. You enter the temple, all the men, it's only in Iran currently today, this practice is only done by men, and only men can enter the octagon in the temples to practice. From the age of 7, you gain access entry to the Zurkhane, which is the name for the temple. It literally means house of strength, but it's, as I said, it's more of a temple. And then you are guided by the Morshed, who literally means guide, or the guru, maybe you can refer to him as, to get you a picture. He sits on a pulpit and he beats a drum and he starts chanting. The chanting is recitations of mystical poetry. There is recitations of spiritual texts, religious texts, And this is meant to infuse spiritual invigoration in the athlete as they enter into the octagon. Everything is done to the rhythm of music, to the beat of the drum. So there is harmony in the movement. There is unity in the practice. And you build the circle. Everyone is facing each other. And I showed you earlier today how we get into the circle and we interlock our legs so that we are one connected body. And then the push-ups start. So you are moving together, you are performing strength feats together, meanwhile having this recitations occurring, and the guidance of the morshid or the master is there to infuse this with you. Now, the physical aspects of the practice, as I said, and we can go more in detail about that perhaps, is not just doing strength and then doing flexibility and then doing mobility. Movements are such that it's all integrative. So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah,
it's best is the experience.
I kind of getting what you're saying, and I love this idea. I really like it, and I can understand, or I can start to understand like the energy. And I think directly, or I saw some videos of the temple and the dancing and the interlocking, and I can see, I've been to events. I grew up in churches because I have a religious family. And, these sorts of experiences, even at church, is something that a lot of people walking around here in Australia don't understand if they didn't grow up at church, because we sing songs. They're very emotive. We do it together. We clap. And I get a sense of that energy. It's a build-up, and it's almost palpable in the room.
Exactly.
And then I think about, like, training here and how we train is Western style and stuff. And it's very different. Like, depending on the coach or the gym, it's very routine and very regimented, and there's music going here and people doing different things, and talking. There's people talking between sets, and that's fine too. But it's very obvious to me when you have, and then I'm thinking of the martial arts sessions where you have you've got a coach there that's more of a strict coach and doesn't like loud music, and there's, I don't know, somehow in the way that they command it, whether it's on purpose or not, there's just a seriousness about the practice, and everyone's working. You can hear people breathing. And can you relate to what I'm saying, Joe?
It's more of a sacredness.
It's more of a sacredness
to the martial arts practice, which goes somewhere towards what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's why I asked about how much is spiritual and stuff, because I think, and the example you gave about BJJs, now it's come to the West and it's everywhere and it's changing itself. I feel like a lot of the sacredness of the dojo has been lost in many, many BJJ gyms because there's so many now. It's very accessible and there's lots of colored belts around. So you'll go from gym to gym and different coaches won't have that respect. So they're just practicing the art, and I wonder, I asked you because I thought if it goes on 10, 15 years from now, are you just going to be doing the strength stuff and the spiritual stuff is diminished? But it sounds to me that it's integrated. There's no way that could happen.
I understand what you're saying, and it was a great example that you gave in regards to that church experience, because it is a worship. You are worshiping, and our worship is worship of strength. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's a physical and spiritual worship of strength, and you're imbibing this strength, because in our philosophy, as I said, we don't really differentiate between the body and the mind. We see it as the body and the spirit. So the body, we see it as an expression of the spirit, and the spirit is the culmination of that body. So we say the body is gross spirit and spirit is subtle body, and you have to strengthen both, otherwise you're unbalanced. So that is our approach to it. And as I mentioned, the example that I gave you, it was in regards to the temples, how this is originally practiced as a ritual ceremony. But in a Western context, and I have done this on purpose, because understanding the culture, I mean, I grew up in the West from the age of 8. I grew up in Sweden, and 20 years ago I moved to Australia. So I understand the Western culture. It's like, in a way, you have to give them the abridged version. You have to give them an abstract kind of. So, and I have focused it more on the physical aspects of the practice, and that's how I really promote it. If you go to persianyoga.com or look me up on social media, you will see that I'm more highlighting those physical practices and arts. But having said that, as I said, it would be lopsided and one-sided if that spiritual essence of it didn't come through. And it does, because it's embedded and integrated in the practice. And as I said earlier, those who really connect with this art want to go to the root of it. They want to explore it. And it gives a wonderful opportunity of a lifelong practice. And that's one of the reasons that I love it so much.
Can you talk to me about this is kind of a little bit off center, but just give us a bit of a background about Persia, because I think for a lot of folks, they don't quite understand. It's now called Iran. What's it like as a culture? When did the name change? You mentioned that only males can practice this. So that's obviously, like in the West, that's like, oh well, that's a thing, right? Can you talk on the culture a bit?
Sure. It has always been Iran. We have always called our country Iran. Persians are an ethnic majority, 55% of the demographic. There are a lot of other different ethnicities. Myself, I'm half Persian, half Saka, which is the eastern tribe of Iran, eastern tribe in Iran. And it is kind of like what brings all these different ethnicities and together is the Persian culture. So in the West, I mean, through the histories of the Greeks, such as Herodotus, Heraclitus, all these people that left us with, written context, biased, I would say, from their point of view, writing about Iran and Iranians, they knew the Persians, and that's why they refer to it as the Persia or Persians. But and that's a kind of misconception, or it's like a misunderstanding, because to us it's Iran. Iran means the land of the Aryans, and it is where these people came, settled, and grew the culture, developed the first global empire in antiquity, the largest empire the world had ever seen to that date, and they used this art form, as I mentioned, very successfully to grow their military might, basically. And obviously, as it happens, and the greed of people, and they started having expansionist ideas and all those things that followed around that. So that's kind of like to answer your questions in regards to when it changed from Persia to Iran. It's always been Iran. Okay. And in the 1920s sometime, the then king kind of made a decree, and it was kind of funny because he said, all right, from now on, this day on forward, any mail that is addressed to Persia, you send it back. It has to be addressed to Iran. And that's when in the West they started calling it Iran, so they think that it's two different things, but it's not two different things, it's the same thing, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so Persians are an ethnic group.
Yes.
Iran is the country, right,
yes.
With borders.
Yes, I mean, it's a very similar situation here in Australia, right? Because you have Australia, but then you have all these different, Kuri nations that live within its borders.
Yep. What's the predominant religion in Iran?
Today, it's Shia Islam, but that has not always been the case. And Persian yoga, originally, the roots of its spiritual practices is very closely related and connected to Mithraism, which used to be the largest religion on the planet. And, this is some 2,000, 3,000 years ago. And then it was flavored with Zoroastrianism, which became the state religion of the Iranian Empire, until 1,600 years ago, when the Muslim Arabs invaded and converted the nation, and this conversion process took like 600 years, 400 to 600 years, and then it became predominantly Muslim, Sunni Muslim, because at that point there was just one flavor of Islam, in a sense, but then it grew this domestic kind of movement grew and it reinterpreted the Islamic culture in through the lens of the Iranian or Persian culture, and that gave rise to what we have today, Shia Islam, which is the predominant religion of that country. And in Iran today, Shia Islam is the largest religion, but you have Sunnis, you have Christians, you have Zoroastrians, you have Hindus and Buddhists, and you also have the largest communities of Jews in Middle East living outside of Israel in Iran.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, would you say it's in that region it's an open culture then? Coming from a part of the world where traditionally there's been a lot of conflict.
Yeah, I understand. And now we're kind of like moving towards, I guess, geopolitics and religion, which is, I have my own opinion, and but that may necessarily not reflect like what's actually is going on. So take this with a grain of salt. But the Persian culture is what has kept these people up until this day relevant and strong and united. And this goes again and again into the history of those invasions. The first one was the invasion of Alexander, and he's Macedonian and comes from a Greek culture, but they come and, come to Iran, and he adopts the Persian culture. He adopts the Persian courtly manners, and that's why his generals killed him off. One of the reasons. And, and that repeats itself with then subsequently the Arabs coming and them becoming Persianized. And then the Turks, and the same thing happened there. And then the Mongols, which came and actually killed by the sword half of the population. That was like a huge, I'm sure you heard about the Mongols and, the atrocities.
A lot of deaths.
Yeah, man. I'm talking pyramids of heads. This is actually true. So, but what happens, and they also start adopting the Persian culture. And during the reign of the Mongols, probably one of the greatest literary works of the Persian culture was commissioned. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like the survivalist instinct of the Persian culture in itself, that is known for its hospitality, that is known for its openness, that has been able to survive that way, if that answers your question.
It does.
When you say Persian culture, they adopted the Persian culture or took it on. It might be a difficult one to answer, but like, what would that be? Because when I think it might be difficult when you say, describe Western culture. It would be difficult for me to describe it. But can you attempt to, is there some obvious ways that could paint a picture for, like, if a group of people came from somewhere else and lived there for a while, they start to adapt the Persian cultures, and you started touching on it. It's like a hospitableness, or what is it?
It's like a tea ceremony.
Yes.
You got to sit down and you got to talk about it.
Yeah.
You got to get to know it and fall in love slowly,
Yeah.
So it's something that happens over time,
It has to,
but it is this essence of light and love. It is this essence of equality and interpreting kind of the hard realities from a more of a heart-centered orientation. And that's what I referred to in the beginning, where you can differentiate between mindfulness and heartfulness. Mindfulness being more of that Eastern approach, whereas heartfulness is at the core of the Persian culture, to my understanding. It is at the core of the Persian culture, and it's very different to mindfulness, where we are saying that you operate from your heart center, and that's your guiding principle. Forget about the mind, because it's a chatterbug, it's a chatter monkey, just like going, and you're trying to steal that. Good luck with that. I mean, there are practices with that. We simply bypass that. Right. We go straight into the heart. So you operate from the center of the heart. That, I guess, should kind of give you an idea of what that Persian culture is about.
How cool. Man, all right, so talk to us about you've discussed a couple of the different implements that are used, and you've mentioned to me outside of the show that they all have the tools that are used in the practice have a relevance to battle. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. So there are 7 arts to Pahlavani or Persian yoga, and each art symbolically represents a stage of battle. And I'm talking about the ancient style of battle in antiquity. And so we need to kind of like flesh that out a little bit, and I will make some references and give some examples to kind of highlight why we use these implements and tools. And the sequence and order of it is very important. As I mentioned to you, in the temples, what we're really doing is a ritual ceremony, and this ritual ceremony is that of an ancient combat situation, which is as close as you can get to an actual full combat without it being full contact. Yeah. So it's we have to understand on the onset that Persian yoga or Pahlavani is a martial arts strength conditioning system. It's not a martial art. It's a martial arts strength conditioning system that is today also used by our national wrestling team. And if you know about the Iranian wrestlers, you know that they're very, very successful on the global scene and the Olympics and all of that stuff. But to go back now to, that ancient style battle, what happens is that you have two armies and, they approach each other. The first thing they do is, you've seen this in movies, it's shield formation. So they line up two armies against battle, shield in hand, getting ready. The shield is the first art of Persian yoga. So that symbolically represents that first stage of battle. And you experienced the shield today, and you kind of like understood that it is about coordination, precision, strength, and movement. And that's kind of like what the functional aspect of the shield. Then it's like the second stage of battle. What happens is that you got now these two armies running and clashing into each other, right? So, it's chaos. You're pushing, you're being pushed, you fall down, you got to get up, you got to be able to move 360 spherical, in all range of motion, be able to produce strength in 360, like a spherical type of mobility, range of motion, and planes of movement. And that is represented to us symbolically by the art of the shena, or the push-up board. So we will do dynamic asanas or postures on the shena at the same time as we're doing strength exercises. So we're doing push-ups, and then we're doing various different dynamic postures, because if you relate it to martial art, static flexibility, in my point of view, doesn't really, or maybe I should reframe and say it like this: dynamic flexibility serves you better than static flexibility, because martial art is about movement. It's about that martial art environment is the battleground. So you need to be quick and be able to produce strength and mobility and flexibility in the motion, not holding something statically. So having understood that, that's what the second art of Persian yoga, or the art of shena, represents. It's that clash of them coming together.
And if people have seen that, it's literally like a strip of timber with a couple of feet. You place your hands on it, and then you have, it looks like, there's a couple of things you can do with that. Once you start moving on it, there's like hundreds of different things hundreds of different movements that happen versatile with that simple piece of equipment. Yeah,
exactly. And this, what you said, is, I guess, representative of the art in its whole. It's very simple. It's meant to be simple, because you're taking farmers and you're going to train them to become warriors. You know what I mean? So it has to be simple. Yeah, and it has to be effective and be very, very efficient. So that brings us to the third stage of battle. And that is when, the weapons comes out and they're bashing each other with hammers, swords, lances, maces, axes, or whatever it is. And that is represented through the art of the meal or the Persian club. So that's what we do. And again, there's a lot of different things that we do with that. And just to kind of tie it back to the realness of it, it represents a handheld weapon, and there's various different ranges and exercises that we do with it. It develops hand-eye coordination, strength, stamina, mobility, and what I was going to say is that is all required when you're using like a handle weapon in combat, I have read that in ancient style combat, they used to swing their arms 3,000 to 4,000 times. So you need that stamina
in a battle.
Yeah. So that's what we represented with swinging the mace or swinging the club for like good 10 to 15 minutes, and again, you start at the low weight, and that low weight is considered to be 6 kilogram pair of clubs. We measure them in pairs, so that's 3 kilograms each club. And again, that goes back to that combat situation, that you had to be able to manipulate a sword or a mace that was between 1 to 2 kilos. So to begin as a beginner, you have to start at 3 kilos, which is 1 kilo heavier, to condition yourself. And then when they give you a weapon, that should feel lighter for you, And if you cannot handle a 6 kilo pair of clubs, I'm sorry, you're not ready. You become a liability rather than an asset. So it's kind of like as a gauge, It's like be able to like
tell
tell the boys from the men, Then you come to the fourth art of Persian yoga, which I guess we call it pazadan. It literally means kicking and stomping. It's footwork. It's footwork in a high-intensity interval training format. This is for cardio aerobic conditioning, agility, balance, and that sort of stuff. The art is very beautiful. It has a lot of folk dance type of aspects to it, and it culminates in whirling. And I'll just briefly explain this term if you're not familiar with it. This is when you spin. You spin around, and perhaps you or your audience are familiar with the whirling dervishes, who were founded. The order of Sufis, Mevlevi Sufis, was founded by Rumi. Do you have heard of this guy?
Rumi, yeah.
Rumi, yeah.
I've seen his quotes on Instagram.
Yeah, he's very popular there. He's very popular.
Awesome. But yeah, some awesome like writings.
Yeah. So he was Persian.
Okay, like a Sufist poet.
Yeah, mystical poet. And we use a lot of his poetry in our recitations. And he really established this form of meditation, formalized it as this form of meditation where they are whirling and they're spinning around themselves to music. And we do that. They have one form of whirling. We have actually 3. So chicken and egg, what came first? I don't know. That's not what it's about. But I'm trying to give you an example of that dynamic movement meditation in practice, right? And this symbolically represents the stage of the battle when, after the main battle, you're either chasing or you're being chased. So you need to have that cardiovascular ability, right?
Yeah.
And usually what happens is that, let's say you're chasing your enemy, they will run to their barracks or castles or fortresses or whatever. And again, this is a scene that you have seen so many times in various movies when these guys are trying to break in, and then those guys on top of the walls chucking stuff on them from the top, This brings us to the 5th art of Persian yoga, which is the art of the kabade. I will bring this with me for the workshop here on the 14th. And this is symbolically representing of the bow. So it's a steel bow, and instead of a string, it has a chain. It's quite heavy, and you swing this overhead. So to develop overhead range of motion, strength, and stamina. And of course, you understand you need to be able to protect yourself from overhead kind of things, right? This art also includes the climbing of a rope. So symbolically, again, this represents when you're climbing over the enemy wall. So this brings us now to the 6th art, right? You've climbed over the enemy wall, and now you're going to wrestle them one by one. So the 6th art of Persian yoga is Pahlavani wrestling, which is the precursor to catch wrestling and freestyle wrestling. So this is the original type of wrestling. I mean, there's many different wrestling styles. There's many different folk wrestling. But the Olympic styles of wrestling today is freestyle wrestling, which, as I mentioned, has its origins in Pahlavani wrestling. And then you have Greco-Roman wrestling, which you can know from the name where it comes from, right? So that's now the 6th art. As I said to you earlier today, all of this is a preparation for the wrestling. It's a warm-up for the wrestling. It's a warm-up for the wrestlers. Our national team, they will practice a couple of times, 2 to 3 times a week, Persian yoga. The rest of the time, on the mat, wrestling technique. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah.
And, of course, that brings us to the end of the battle. You know, either you won or you lost. Yeah. And the seventh art of Persian yoga is the art of the bell and the drum. This is the art of the master or the guru, where he beats the drum and rings the bell to guide the training ceremony, and he does these recitations and singing and chanting, which symbolically represents the after party or the after lamentations.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it includes both those type of aspects. Some of them are very, very sorrowful, you know, and reminds you of the fallen heroes. And some of them are very, very uplifting and spiritual. That reminds you of like the essence of victory. So that is the 7 arts of Persian yoga.
That's so cool.
Can I ask you, for the push-up board, what did you call that again?
Shena, Shena, and in Persian it literally means swimming, because we are moving very fluidly in wave-like motions in a circular, continuous fashion. So there's you start, you don't stop.
Okay, the Shena. Does that physical object relate to something of
the
battle?
sword?
It is the sword. Okay.
Yes, it symbolically represents the sword. So we have the shields, we have the sword, we have the mace, and we have the bow.
Incredible. So do you, like, how do you, obviously, like, if you're practicing, you practice all parts?
Everything. In that sequence that I mentioned.
In one particular training session, you touch on all of them?
All of them. You go through them from the beginning to
order.
end. Yes, in that order. So you're, as I said, it's a ritual ceremony of a battle.
Mm-hmm.
Something I found interesting today, so before we recorded the podcast, a few of us downstairs had a play with the sung, which is the shields.
Yes.
Which, you know, from the outside, it looks like a couple of like tabletops. Like it's a big board of timber with a handle in the middle. And, you know, you can see this on the Jungle Brothers Instagram, actually, because I'll put this up late today. So folks, by the time this is out, they'll be able to see it. But, like with everything that Kashi has taken us through, he makes it look incredibly easy. And then like I try it and some of the guys here try it and we just fucking flail. Like we struggle with it, right? The coordination and the strength and all these little things, the grip strength and the wrist and all that. It's so demanding. But what I found interesting was that you said you had mastered that particular shield or that pair of shields, which now weigh 50 kilos, right, total?
Yes.
And you've been working with those same 2 shields for the last 3 years.
That's correct. Yeah.
So for 3 years, you haven't been able to move to like a new weight, or it's just been that same fucking thing. And I can only imagine that for the first year or 2, it was really hard. Like it would have really sucked.
It did. And I gave up in the middle.
Yeah,
I think I mentioned that to you. For a period of time, I was just like, this is not going to happen because I was stuck at 20. Because I should maybe say this. All of our arts have kind of like rules of thumb or like kind of like a progression where when you master that, you go on to the next weight. And it's very simple. With the shields, for example, when you can press 50 hands, that's a pair of hands, so left and right together, it's count. One left and right is 1, so you got to do 50 of those. So 100 reps, maybe you can say. So once you achieve that, you are then ready to go to the next weight or the next stage, which is now for me the 60 kilo shields, which I'm very excited about. But I decided to follow the protocol, believe in the system, and stick with it. And I found a tremendous amount of benefit, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. Because when you put yourself through that and you put yourself in that state of dedication and practice and you overcome, it's very simple, right? You're just pressing a pair of shields. I mean, you said it's not easy, but I'm saying it's simple. It's simple, but it's not easy, you know? And you stick with it, something magical happens, you know? You develop this like emotional fitness. You develop this mental fitness, and that's what you need on the mat. You need to push throughout the discomfort. As I showed you a little clip as I was like, did my 50, mastered it like a couple of weeks ago. You know, I was dying, you know? Yeah. But I was also being reborn into a new strength.
How many minutes does it take you to press
10
50
minutes.
hands. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 minutes under load. It's kind of, similar to like working with a kettlebell in a sort of, maybe somewhere around a Turkish get-up kind of position, just to give folks a little bit of context.
Same principles.
But it's like non-stop under load, 10 minutes, both hands, and it's constantly moving.
Yeah, it's not 6 reps, it's not 10 reps, it's not even 15, 20 reps, You got to push through, you got to keep going. And that develops, not just strength and endurance, but I would say power,
We're going to wrap it up in a minute. It's been an action-packed hour. Could you take us through what you're going to be teaching us at the intro workshop? So just to give folks a bit of background understanding of that.
Yeah, so the introductory workshop, I will give a brief presentation to the 5 arts. We won't do the wrestling part, and I'm not going to sing, definitely. But I'll guide you through the 5 arts of the Persian yoga that I mentioned. So we will go through the Sang, shields. We'll go to the Shena, push-up board, the Mil, Persian clubs, the Pazaran, which is the footwork and whirling, as well as the Kabode or the steel bow. So I will introduce you to all of that. We hopefully get to go through the fundamentals of using them safely and effectively. And we will do a group practice session or a group ceremony that mimics that ancient style battle that we've been discussing over the hour. And I gotta say, it's been really great to be here with you guys and share this with you guys because you martial artists and also dancers, they pick up this art very quickly. It's because of the movement protocol, and the neurology is already primed to pick something like this up and push yourself to the next level. And I hope that's what I will do at the workshop.
Very cool, man.
Thank you so much.
I'm really looking forward to that, and I appreciate you reaching out to us and, bringing your implements in, carrying this heavy stuff from the car, spending the time to explain it and give us a taste of what it's all about.
And thank you for being open and receptive to this. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the chat.
Wonderful.
Looking forward to the workshop.
Be tireless, guys.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. That was Kashi from Persian Yoga. Oh, Kashi, before you go, can you tell just where people can contact you, your website, Instagram?
Persian Yoga. Just Google Persian Yoga, @Persian Yoga, and you want to reach me directly, it's kashi@persianyoga.com.
Very cool. Very cool. Get in touch, guys. Check it out. The intro workshop's going to be suited for all levels. So if you're intrigued by that little taste of the culture there, definitely come and do it. You can find the link on our social media, or you can just go directly to Kashi's website or his Instagram. If you like the episode, why don't you tell someone about it? Help support the show. Take a screenshot, post about it, tag us. Your support helps us to keep doing the shows and to bring awesome guests like Kashi into the place. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Panavor. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Thank you.